Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another RISB webinar. My name is Sudha. I'm part of the senior leadership team at RISB. I'm the GM of Products and Innovation, and I'll be your host for this webinar today. Before I proceed any further, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land where we meet today. And for me, in Perth today, that's the Whadjuk Noongar people. I would like to pay my respects to their elders, past and present. I'd also like to extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here with us today. This webinar coincides with the International Level Crossings Awareness Day 2025, or we shorten form call it ILCAD 2025, which is on the 5th of June. It also coincides with the 200th anniversary of the world's first passenger railway. On September 27, 1825, the first engine ran from Darlington to Stockton, preceded by a man on a horseback carrying a flag reading, "The private danger is the public good." When the horseman was out of the way, Stevenson opened the throttle and pulled the train of wagons carrying 450 persons at a speed of 15 miles or 24 kilometers per hour. We have come a long way from that particular day. The anniversary recognizes the pioneering spirit that began in 1825 with the Stockton and Darlington Railway and looks ahead to the future of rail, highlighting the continued importance of innovation, sustainability, and collaboration within the industry. From the outset, risks associated with railway operations have been understood, and safety has remained a critical focus. As rail continues to expand globally, reducing collisions at railway crossings is vital to protect lives and to ensure the efficient operation of transport networks. ILCAD 2025 unites countries and industry to promote awareness, education, and innovation in level crossing safety. In Australia, where our vast networks intersect with rural and urban roads across states and other jurisdictions, collaboration is key to addressing the unique safety risks we face. The National Level Crossing Safety Strategy 2023 to 2032 aims to deliver zero harm through a collaborative national approach. RISB is engaged in this discussion, supporting and leading on some of the key items in the strategic plan. RISB is also the custodian of the ALCAM system, supporting the National ALCAM Committee. To mark this occasion, RISB is hosting a special webinar featuring a panel discussion to highlight national efforts and insights into level crossing safety. We have worked with the National Level Crossing Safety Program Manager's Office to put together today's expert panel discussion to provide those insights. Special thanks to John Pearson from the National Level Crossing Safety Program Management Office for his efforts in organizing the panel today, and to Sally Stannard, Chair of the National Level Crossing Safety Committee, for her continued support for this important issue. The panel will be chaired by Bernard Carlin, Chief, Centre for Rail Safety and Maritime Safety, Transport for New South Wales. Bernard joined Transport for New South Wales in 2012 as the Director, Strategy and Policy, and has led the Centre for Road Safety since 2025 and Maritime Safety since 2026. He's a board member of ANCAP and a member of the Ausroad Safety Task Force. Before I hand over to Bernard, I would like to remind you to add your questions in the Q&A tab available in the Teams menu. And we will answer those questions after the presentation and discussion. Over to you, Bernard.
Thank you so much, Sudha, and thank you, everyone. Looks like we've got some great interest in today's webinar, and I'd also like to acknowledge that I'm on the land of the Gadigal people and pay my respects to elders past and present. Welcome to today. We have some great panel members here to also provide insights into our whole management across the country of reducing trauma and increasing safety on our level crossings across the country. We have John Barry, who's the Digital Products Director for the National Heavy Vehicle Regulator. So welcome, John. Jessica Linsell, who's the Director of Policy from the Office of National Rail Safety Regulator, and Patrick Coleman, Freight on Rail Group. And thank you for representing the industry today, Patrick, and providing your insights. I'm just going to give a short overview of the national level crossings framework and how that's operating, touch on the roundtable which took place in 2023, and also then we'll have some presentations by each of the individuals and a little bit of a Q&A between us, and then the opportunity for your questions to be answered as well. Clearly, it's really critical that we aim towards zero trauma associated with people just negotiating level crossings across Australia. We see that over the 2014 to 22 that there were almost 8,000 near hits, 322 collisions, and tragically 39 lives lost in level crossing crashes. And so, it's a really critically important part of our work to ensure that we have national coordination and ensure that there's consistent and cooperative and collaborative approaches across both government at all levels and industry in providing a safer journey for people when they're negotiating level crossings across the country. And so that National Level Crossing Safety Committee, of which I'm a member, has representatives from government and regulatory bodies across Australian jurisdictions, but also has a structure where it actually is also able to engage directly with industry. And Sally Stannard has established a framework that means that there's regular input from those in the rail industry, as well as those who've tragically been touched by trauma associated with level crossing crashes. And Sally is regularly meeting with those advocates as well, which forms a really important part of the work that we do in addressing safety issues right across the country. I might just go to the next slide. And so we've, of course, have developed nationally in a very collaborative way across industry and governments at all levels the National Level Crossing Strategy, and it has 4 focus areas. So clearly education and enforcement are critical underpinnings for ensuring that we maintain safety at level crossings and increase the awareness of level crossings and trigger that sort of desirable behaviour change in users that reinforces compliance through improved enforcement. And I've got to say, in my own jurisdiction, we have a tremendous relationship with the New South Wales Police in being able to ensure that there's regular enforcement activities so that we create a deterrent effect right across the network by ensuring that people are aware of their obligations, but also that there's enforcement that backs up all of that education that we do in the system. The other critical area of the 4 is asset technology and innovation, and clearly upgrading of the level crossings across the country and that significant increase in the federal government's contribution as well as the states to advance the upgrades of our highest risk level crossings across the country has been absolutely critical as part of the strategy. And of course, ensuring that asset maintenance and also technology-based solutions, when we know that a lot of that infrastructure solutions is quite expensive and not as fast in terms of us being able to address the issues. There's been a lot of investment and work done in more innovative technology-based solutions for level crossing safety in recent years, and so we'll hear a little bit about that from the panel today. Clearly, decision-making on an evidence-based basis is absolutely fundamental to, being able to ensure that we're investing in the right areas and that we're addressing and understand the critical issues across the country as well. And so the capture of level crossing data in a nationally consistent manner and sharing the analysis that delivers insights to inform those practical safety improvements and decisions is fundamental to the strategy that we have in place. And as well, that sense of national coordination. We, and I think under Sally's chairing of this particular group, we've actually, I think, developed a very strong collaborative approach to tackling the issues at hand and really transparently looking at the systems that exist across the country and having a real focus on driving change. So developing that consistent national coordinated approach, improved collaboration and sharing of knowledge, driving those actions, ensuring that we've got the right sort of education approach across the country that addresses these incidents at level crossings has been fundamental to the design of that, the strategy itself. I just wanted, next slide, thanks Claire. So I just wanted to as well focus on the tragic crash which took place back in 2023 and reflect on the tragic loss of both Kevin Bacon and Mick Warren, who were killed when the Pacific National Freight train they were driving collided with the truck. And it, this is the essence of why we have a national level crossing safety strategy in the first instance, is to ensure that we actually design the system, maintain and operate a system that leads to the prevention of this sort of tragic loss of life. And wanted to acknowledge and pay our condolences to all of those who have been impacted, because we know that every death on our networks has a ripple effect within our organisations across the community, and tragically directly affecting the families and loved ones of those who are involved as well. And so it's not just an academic exercise that we're engaged in trying to improve safety. This is all about actually the impacts that tragic loss of life and serious injuries has in our community as well. And that event did trigger clearly the roundtable which took place, where both the ministers, the minister from my jurisdiction and our federal minister took place. And Claire might go to that slide with the 10 priority actions that actually came out of the roundtable. And look, we've actually made quite good progress in delivering those. And just I'll summarise because we want to get on to the other panel members as well. But 5 of those have been implemented now. Things like Pacific National, Horizon Cube committed to adopting the new code of practice for level crossing train visibility, and that's been achieved. Road freight operators like Limfox, ANZ and Toll Group committed to incorporating level crossing details in their pre-trip briefings for heavy vehicle drivers, and we know that they're overrepresented in incidents at level crossings, and that's been completed as well. A review of interface agreements, which ONSA led and contributed to the National Transport Commission's review, which developed a range of recommendations as well, has been completed, and a review of penalties as well has been completed. And also establishing sort of a reporting framework where the outcomes from the roundtable have now been integrated into the reporting of our National Level Crossings Committee in order to have transparency about our progress on implementing not just the National Level Crossing Strategy, but also those outcomes from the roundtable. So good progress has been made, and no doubt some of the panel members will reflect on some of that as well in their presentations. And look, we do have a range of other things that are happening, including a pilot of new generation camera technology for enforcement at level crossings, and also a few projects which are around establishing more robust metadata and information that's available for making decisions. So, look, I think we're ready to hand over to the first of the presenters. And so you introduced John earlier, but John, I think you're first off the rank, and there's Claire's actually doing the presentation for you now. Hand over to John Barry. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Bernard. Thanks for the opportunity to talk to you today as well, and represent the National Heavy Vehicle Regulator. It has been since 2013 that the NHVR was first established, and it has taken us a while to get to the point where we are now, where actions 5 and 8 that were just referred to there are starting to become a reality. From a data and technology perspective, it's been quite an eye-opener, the complexity associated with the road network, and particularly at the interfaces with assets on the public road network. Heavy vehicles themselves are also quite complex when it comes to their assessments, and that's made the challenge of working towards an agreed metadata across different states and territories, different asset owners, and then building that into a system which is usable from a mapping perspective, not only for the heavy vehicle industry and drivers, but equally as important for asset owners and road managers themselves. Our vision is to achieve that safe and efficient, but also productive environment for the heavy vehicle industry. And as Bernard pointed out, there is an overrepresentation of heavy vehicles in the level crossing instance that we see, and that has largely shaped a lot of what we've been doing from a national network map perspective and some of the stuff that I'll go through today. Move on to the next slide, please. So as I said, the asset interfaces has been a particularly interesting part of building out a heavy vehicle spatial network map. The public road network interfaces with a range of different assets, level crossings obviously pertinent here, but also structures, bridges that can also interface with level crossings, and obviously overhead infrastructure as well. There is a requirement under the Heavy Vehicle National Law for heavy vehicle operators and other parties as part of the chain of responsibility to safely plan those routes with reference to road and asset owner and manager requirements. What we've been attempting to do with the National Network Map and the Route Planner is to make that as efficient and easy as possible and provide that information in a way that's useful, that drives safe outcomes, and also has a view on ensuring productivity in the heavy vehicle industry. Next slide, please. Okay, so we do have two classes of vehicles. There are what are referred to as general access heavy vehicles, which can operate on the public road network. They still have the responsibility, as I mentioned before, to safely plan their routes. But it's generally the restricted access vehicles where we see a greater safety risk. And there are some mechanisms within the Heavy Vehicle National Law to manage restricted access vehicles. That's using notices and permits, instruments that provide a little bit more control, and more importantly, require road managers to provide consent, but also for the regulator to be satisfied that consents of other asset owners are also considered, particularly under the law of relevant state territory jurisdictions. More importantly, the NHVR is required to ensure that significant risks to public safety are appropriately managed, and level crossings is certainly a key area of interest for us and has shaped what we've been doing on the National Network Map from a technology and data perspective. Next slide, please. So we've recently rebranded what was referred to as the NHVR portal to NHVR Go. Pertinent to this discussion is the National Heavy Vehicle Access Maps. That was an important milestone for us back in December 2023 to bring together what was previously separate state-managed maps into one national map that provided one location for industry, but also for road and asset owners to be able to go and start managing access decisions on the road network. So critical to that was ensuring that the technology platform itself would be able to support real-time routing. So we're getting close to that step, and the platform itself is certainly there to enable that. But we do have a vision of being able to provide services, not just through the NHVR, but working with technology providers, particularly those that develop in logistics and have in cab navigation technologies, to be able to leverage the data and services from the national network map, so that they can ideally in real time be able to provide safety information to drivers as they're traversing the road network. To make that happen, probably the most important and underestimated part of the technology and data platform was providing self-service tools for road managers and for asset owners to maintain that infrastructure data and access consent in real time. So I'll show you a little bit of that now. The next slide, please. So the customer-facing tools is the national network map. One of the changes we made to how maps were managed previously is we took a very vehicle-centric approach, and ultimately the access that a vehicle can get varies greatly from what you're seeing here, an A double vehicle. You know, there's B triples, quad vehicles, very long road train, down to smaller vehicles that equally have impact. So oversized overmass vehicles, cranes, and so on. To those carrying long and large pieces of freight and infrastructure. So moving to the vehicle-centric model also gave us the opportunity to present national maps that were targeted at the particular requirements of the different classes of heavy vehicles. And more importantly, we also started to look for the first time to bring in asset interface information. So we started off with bridges and culverts, and have now started to bring in level crossing information as well, and making that very transparent on the map itself. I'll move on to the next slide. So just recently, in the last week, in fact, we've gone into a pilot for the route planner, which takes the map and then allows heavy vehicle operators and drivers to plot journeys from A to B. And for the first time, the journey will now bring up information relevant to the access requirements. Currently and traditionally, maps have presented information that really required the user to go in and dig in and see what the restrictions might be on a particular network, or the conditions might be. With the route planner that's currently in pilot now, that information is automatically pulled out of the network and presented in a fashion that can be printed, providing a route card and essentially the foundations of navigation, which will highlight where there are conditions and restrictions on that particular route, and also provide the opportunity for the operator and planner to plan around that. So where there is a restriction, where that vehicle can't use a particular structure or is not allowed to cross particular level crossing, they can then look at how to optimize their route to avoid that safety issue. Our ultimate vision is to provide what we call intelligent routing, which will automatically avoid those restrictions and provide options for the operator and the planner to help them find the most productive but safe journey. Next slide, please. So as I said earlier, one of the key underestimated aspects of the platform was actually providing the tools for road and asset owners to be able to make updates to network maps, to conditions, to restrictions. And we wanted that to be something that could be done in real time in an easy to use self-service web application. So we invested a bit more time than we thought, but I think we've got a great result in tools that are self-service. They're available from large state road managers down to rural, remote, local governments, and also progressively moving into asset owners, including level crossing and rail owners at those interfaces, providing the ability to come in a secure environment, but also in a freely accessible, no charge platform to go and make updates to heavy vehicle network information, which can include opening up access, but also more importantly, identifying safety issues and providing the relevant conditions and restrictions. There's a lot of workflow and legislative workflow behind the scenes that do things like look at standard conditions around this to try and improve the communication of conditions and restrictions to users of the map, and also checks and balances to ensure that one of the key features at interfaces is almost the two-key turn, where both parties need to make the decision for access. And so some of that complexity has taken a little bit of time to get through, but we have got to a stage now where we are working towards providing and making this particular tool available to those level crossing asset managers who are interested in being part of the initial pilot. We've also started working with some other asset owners when it comes to particularly overhead infrastructure to help integrate them into that decision-making process. Next slide, please. On the roadmap, we have been working with a number of state and territory road agencies, particularly Transport for New South Wales, on level crossing information data sets, and also with particularly important, the ability to record where those level crossings are. Linking the data across systems is one of the challenges, and establishing that metadata, but also a unique identifier is something that things like the outcome ID provides us opportunities for. And then how we provide that access decision making at the level crossing interfaces is part of the active roadmap at the moment. I think that is it.
Great. Thanks, John. I think I may have misappropriated your organisation and slotted you in the Office of National Rail Safety Regulator instead of NHVR at the beginning, so my apologies if that was the case. NHVR is playing a really critical role in, as we've said, there is an overrepresentation of heavy vehicles and some really complex issues which we need to, which are challenging to, and it's great to see, use of technology and data and systems to actually address those issues. So thanks for that presentation. And we're about to head off to Patrick Coleman, Freight Rail Group, and Patrick's presentation. So over to you, Patrick.
Thanks, Bernard. And I appreciate the opportunity to provide some information about the priorities that are in place on behalf of the rail freight industry through members of the Freight on Rail group. I'll also touch on some things as well. Most of what I say will be what industry is doing, the rail freight industry, but touch on some things that the particular company I work at, Horizon, is doing as a member of the Freight on Rail group. While safety has been a long-standing priority for our industry, for the rail freight industry, an observed increase from within our industry of level crossing accidents and near misses, particularly over the last 3 or 4 years, has resulted in our industry, along with governments and regulators and other industries, taking additional actions to address level crossing safety risks. And Bernard, you covered a lot of those important developments that have happened. And it's been very significant for the rail freight industry to participate in the National Level Crossing Roundtable that you mentioned, that was held in March last year. We've taken it upon ourselves as an industry to take some additional actions. We've done that recognising that there's a number of challenges to improving level crossing safety and getting to that outcome that we want, which is to aim to prevent incidents and accidents from occurring in the future. It requires a lot of work across a number of areas. There's no one particular solution that's going to address it for all of us, and we need to use evidence and data to inform priorities. So that's been what's guided us in identifying some particular priorities, areas for action. These areas are quite aligned with the priority actions that were agreed at the National Level Crossing Roundtable, but the ones I've included on that slide are some specific ones that our industry is particularly focused on based on our own evidence and our own feedback from where we're particularly aiming at wanting to improve the situation for our train crew who are working on freight rail operations, and also for the communities where we have operations. Claire, if you could please go to the next slide. What I thought I would do is just give an update on some of those areas, not all of them, but ones that we see as particularly important, how we're going with them, and what are some of the next steps we're taking. And we do see that the upgrades to infrastructure at where the location of level crossings are important, particularly in regional areas of Australia, where as we know, passive level crossings, there can be key challenges there. We acknowledge the investments that governments have made and continue to make. The federal government's regional level crossing upgrade program has been an important addition to investment in infrastructure. And as an industry, the Freight on Rail group our members are providing assessments to state transport departments to inform which level crossings should be updated. Again, the importance of the data and the evidence that we have, including from cameras that we include on our train, feedback from the people who take part in our operations, as well as identifying level crossings that we believe need to be upgraded. Aurizon itself as a company is contributing to some improvement projects where Aurizon is a rail infrastructure manager, as is other rail infrastructure managers that are part of the Freight on Rail group. Another important priority, and I've mentioned it there, the second one is working with governments and regulators. We've wanted to step up our efforts there. Part of that comes from the National Level Crossing Roundtable last year, but part of it also comes from initiating discussions, and we've appreciated them, with the National Heavy Vehicle Regulator. And John's already covered some of the detailed work that the NHVR is doing. As a rail freight industry, we want to share more of the data analysis and information compared to what we did in the past with the NHVR. And we support, and this is probably getting to something that Jessica might cover, but we also support the importance of ONZA partnering with the NHVR and trucking industry stakeholders to develop a sustainable national education program for safe driving. They're some of the things we've supported. We've taken initial steps in that area. We're planning to do more in that particular area. Another important area of focus for our industry has been train visibility at level crossings, which you covered, Bernard, in your introduction. The 3 Freight on Rail group members in particular, Pacific National, Southern Short Haul Railroad and Aurizon, have been involved in trials over the last 3 years to improve lighting on trains and to add additional lighting and to test that lighting. We've been part of a working group that ONZA has chaired, that RISBY's been a part of, and importantly, thanks to ONZA, there were 2 assessments. I think people might be aware, listening to this webinar, that there were 2 assessments undertaken of those trials by the Monash Institute of Railway Technology, and those assessments have informed and are informing both changes that have taken place to RISBY's standard on rolling stock visibility, AS 7531. There's already changes that have been made to that standard. There are further changes proposed. Importantly, the trials have also informed the development of the Code of Practice, Bernard, that you mentioned, which came into effect in December 2024. And as I've just said, further proposed changes are being considered to the RISBY standard, and if they are adopted in the standard, they will be reflected in the Code of Practice. There's that important connection between the standard and the new Code of Practice that Aurizon, for our part, I think, Bernard, you touched on it, Aurizon has committed to implementing the standard, as have other rail freight operators that were in attendance at the National Roundtable in March last year. Finally, I just wanted to touch on education and awareness. Increased commitment by both industry and governments has been something that we see as also making a significant contribution. I know that the international level crossing awareness work that's being done is highlighting that this is a common area of work across nations across the world, where level crossing safety continues to be a challenge, and the sharing of information to inform effective awareness campaigns is very important. Horizon and others in the Freight on Rail group we've run our own awareness campaigns, but importantly, we've worked to support government campaigns, including by a campaign organised by the Federal Department of Infrastructure and Transport, and also by TrackSafe. And we think it's important that we share our materials, we share feedback with each other, and we aim to extend education and awareness as something that's ongoing throughout the year. Weeks like this week, where we recognise the importance of level crossing safety internationally and Rail Safety Week, they're very important to highlight it. They're important opportunities, but we see this as requiring an ongoing effort by all involved to raise awareness. And just to mention and show one of the main images from Horizon's campaign, which commenced last year, is on the next slide, please, Claire. I'll just conclude by showing one of the images from that campaign, which does feature train crew. They are train crew who were prepared to give their agreement to being part of the campaign and to voice their experiences, because it reminds us all that we've got this shared objective of wanting to make sure that everyone in the future is as safe as possible who are involved in rail freight or who are living in the communities where there are level crossings. Thanks, Bernard.
Yeah, thanks, Patrick. That's fantastic. And I think on that note of, a recognition that we really do need to engage really broadly with the community and with a whole range of stakeholders in sharing resources and sharing our approach to and having many voices across the country actually delivering the message of level crossing safety, absolutely critical. And I can see quite a transformation in recent years about that level of collaboration that we have across agencies, which has been really refreshing and appropriate in response to, as you say, the tragic increase that we see in not just the risk, but the actual manifestation of trauma for people in the community as well. So that's been a really big highlight. I will pass over to Jessica Linsell, who's the Director of Policy from the Office of National Rail Safety Regulator. Over to you, Jess.
Thanks, Bernard. Thanks, everyone, for having me here today. I'm joining you from the lands of the Gadigal people. I'm here representing the Office of the National Rail Safety Regulator, and we're the independent safety regulator for rail. We are established through the Rail Safety National Law, and we regulate the safety of over 300 accredited and registered operators around the country. Each of those operators has a responsibility under the Rail Safety National Law to eliminate risk wherever possible, or to manage that risk so far as is reasonably practical. And obviously the level crossing does present a risk to safety, and as a consequence, in our national work program, our regulatory activity, level crossing safety is a focus in each state and territory around the country. So there's a couple of things that each of our officers do. So obviously there's the response to incidences, fatalities and near hits. And just some stats on those that are reported through to ONSA. So they're notifiable occurrences that are required to be reported to us. In the 2024 calendar year, so last calendar year, there were 57 collisions reported through to ONSA, 913 near hits, and that's at the over 20,000 level crossings around the nation. So if anyone's interested in that data, we do publish dashboards on our website, which allows you to interrogate that data in a bit more detail. So I encourage you all to visit our website. But you can see on the screen that our regulatory activity comprises investigations, audits, inspections. So there's a good mix of both proactive and reactive regulatory activity undertaken by the National Rail Safety Regulator. And as Bernard said, a really important part of that is that education, communication and engagement. And so as ONSA goes about its activity around the country, it's really important our collaboration with councils as the managers of local roads, with police, particularly as we we respond to incidents and fatalities and near hits. As was, I think, made really clear today, the engagement and collaboration with the National Heavy Vehicle Regulator. But next slide, just in terms of particular initiatives that we're working on. So I think there's been reference already to the Rail Safety National Law Review. So that is a review that was undertaken at the request of ministers all around the country, which looked at, amongst other things, the effectiveness of interface agreements. And so that review, which was published in June of last year, is primarily the responsibility of the National Transport Commission to implement, particularly where there are changes recommended to the review. But there are some recommendations that ONSA is taking the lead in implementing, particularly where they don't need any legislative change to bring into effect. And so the three recommendations that relate to interface agreements are, the first one is actually to explore options to improve the effectiveness of interface agreements. And that recommendation is that the National Transport Commission, the National Heavy Vehicle Regulator and ONSA pursue that together to identify those opportunities to make that existing requirement for road managers and rail infrastructure managers to enter into an interface agreement to make that more effective. There is also a recommended law change. So ONSA already has some powers in respect of those interface agreements, but the NTC has recommended that ONSA be given additional powers through changes to the law so that we can review and actually direct amendments to interface agreements. So the timeline for those law changes, I believe, are available on the NTC's website. And so although changes aren't quick, we will see those changes come into effect probably towards the beginning of 2027. But the other recommendation is for ONSA to develop an interface agreement code of practice. So similar to the code of practice that has been released in respect of train visibility at level crossings, and I can talk about that next. There is a recommendation that we take a similar approach to interface agreements. I will point out that ONSA does already publish information and guidance material for the management of interface and the risks that arise because of rail infrastructure and road infrastructure crossing at a level. So we've got template agreements, we've got information for road managers, and we've got information for rail infrastructure managers. So just speaking again that if you're interested in understanding what is already available, please visit our website. That's available for everybody. But as been mentioned a couple of times, ONSA has published towards the end of 2024 our first approved code of practice related to train visibility at level crossings. That code of practice has a legal status. So while the code itself is not mandatory, it does have standing in court so that the court can use that code of practice in considering whether or not a rail transport operator has met their responsibility to ensure safety so far as is reasonably practical. So that is a really important document that establishes essentially a minimum baseline expectation for undertaking risk assessments at level crossings and in terms of assessing the controls that are necessary to manage safety, risks to safety so far as is reasonably practical. So again, the code of practice is available on our website, and there's some additional material that will allow that will assist operators in interpreting the requirements of that code. The other thing that I wanted to call out was the importance of data, and I think that's been made really clear throughout the presentations we've heard today. But I particularly wanted to call out that ONSA has launched an updated version of our National Level Crossing portal that will be the publication of that portal will be made more available over the coming weeks. So please stay tuned for updates about that portal. But we do recognise that data and the sharing of data provides valuable information to industry, road managers and other asset owners about the management of safety at level crossings, and so we recognise the importance moving forward. I mentioned earlier that we have recently increased the availability and accessibility of information on our website, so I also encourage people to have a look at those dashboards and engage with those. But I think that's it for me. Next slide. So that's our vision, Safe Railways for Australia. And on that note, I'll pass back to you, Bernard.
Great, thanks. Yes, it's really evident that throughout all of the presentations, a tremendous amount of effort that's going into uplifting and making more transparent and available resources for people who are working in the sector as well, who are concerned about level crossing safety. Just a very quick round of questions, I suppose, that flow from that. And so, Patrick, I know the industry is working towards much more innovative approaches. The infrastructure and rolling stock transformation can be quite long lead in terms of changing our infrastructure. But have you noticed, and are you aware of a much more concerted effort in terms of sort of transforming the safety of level crossings in light of sort of new technologies that are available and innovations?
Bernard, we think that the area of technology and innovation is potentially can make a really significant contribution to helping us achieve the safety outcomes that we all have this shared desire to achieve. Actually, John Barry covered off. We see them broadly in three areas, and John covered off one of the most important prospective areas for technology, and that's safe journey planning for freight operations. And John touched on it from the heavy vehicle side. It's very similar. We see it very similar in rail freight operations, that the technology there is helping us to plan and offer the potential. It's still in the early stages, as you say. There's investment in that's been made into these technologies to improve how they're utilised in terms of being part of locomotives and part of freight operations, but also connected to control rooms to allow safer operations. We're very interested. It's one of the areas we want to work to make available more shared information with the trucking industry, so there's common ground between us and we can learn from each other there. So I think one important area of the technology is using it to safe journey planning, but also safer operations while operations are underway. This next step that I'm about to mention is something that we still need to do a lot of work on, but there is the potential for technology to prevent a potential near miss or accident through the technology allowing access to where either a rail, a train operation might be, where it might be coming in and approaching a level crossing, and the information to be shared with road operators, or vice versa, and therefore the technology to be able to be used to act to either slow a vehicle down or take further action if needed. So there is the potential for technology to be used in those ways, because our freight operations network, and we've all touched on it, there are so many level crossings in Australia. It's important that we work very carefully to make sure the technology can do what it promises to do, but there's a lot of potential for that to be something that is really significant, and we'll continue to work on that as a priority. It's perhaps not something we see as offering a big jump forward in the near term, but certainly over the medium to longer term, we see it as very, very important.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think, John, that sort of does prompt the some of those fundamental issues that that our heavy vehicles have in relation to their operations over level crossings, like short stacking and access. And you've already talked to us a little bit about how we're moving towards a mapping systems and better advisory for actual heavy vehicle drivers and companies that are operating vehicles. But what do you think are the sort of the key challenges for the next few years in actually really embedding that within the industry and also taking full advantage of that technology that Patrick's talking about as well?
Oh, look, I think the key challenges we're starting to get on top of, and that's being able to link data across systems. It's very important where you've got particularly quite specialist systems for, say, level crossing management or for the management of rail freight versus quite different systems and requirements really for freight on the public road network. That interface point won't be achieved by trying to centralize all the information in one place. We need to be able to link information, and so very basic things like having a unique identifier that's common and shared for the location of level crossings, and equally as important, the location as it interfaces with the road. It could be a bridge going over, it could be other assets that are involved, and so that's where the metadata and the way that we link from a data perspective, that information is the critical, because that will help unlock a lot of information that's already in digital forms and systems on both sides of the equation when it comes to rail and the public road infrastructure. As that's, I think, where we need to continue investing time and effort. I think there's again a lot of systems that are used by small and large freight operators where they have ILCAD navigation tools, and being able to expose data in an open way is the other critical factor. Something that's limited us from an NHVR perspective since inception is the availability of data, but making sure that that data can then be made accessible to third-party providers, that they can leverage that in their navigation tools. And so having the right controls, obviously there's still decision-making information that doesn't and shouldn't be put out publicly, but where that information has come down to a decision on the access for a particular vehicle, whether it's a restriction or condition, being able to have that made freely accessible is critical. And so that comes down to the choices that you make with the systems that you have. Sometimes, and this is something we're monitoring, the demand for that can require a cost associated with providing that information, particularly if you're looking at real-time information flows. So that's another consideration to be made. But so far, what we've seen is that if we can get the data linking right, if we can provide mechanisms that allow for the open use of that data in a controlled way, then I think you'll find that the private sector in particular, when it comes to the road transport industry, will jump and leverage those information services as quickly as we can make them available.
Yeah, fantastic. And look, I might just one last question to Jessica before we open up sort of any questions we've got online. But clearly that leads us to many of these level crossings are actually on local government roads, and so building a capacity for that data and systems and analysis and being able to feed it into our systems. Yes, I suppose interested in hear from Monster around sort of a challenge and the pathway forward for supporting that uplift for local government and road operators.
Yeah, and look, ONZA appreciates that the capacity of a local government to manage these crossings. I mean, councils only have limited resources for a very large remit. And so our regulatory officers, our general managers in each state take the opportunity when we're out and about on the network to engage with councils about their responsibilities in terms of managing risks at level crossings. And often we find that there is a lack of awareness of those responsibilities. And so it's a really good opportunity for us to get outside on the level crossings with the RIM, with the road manager, to discuss, what the requirements are. Often the things that fall within the responsibility of local government is making sure that the road traffic signage is up to date and the road markings. But the RSNL review did recognise the important role that road managers play in collaboration with rail infrastructure managers, and part of the recommendations are to work with the NTC and the NHVR to look at improving that capacity and capability of local road managers to be able to identify and manage the risks at level crossing. So I will say that even though with all the improvements in data, with the release of this code of practice around the train visibility, there's no one single bullet that's going to solve level crossing safety. And so it's about bringing together all the parties that have a role in managing risk at that interface, and working collaboratively and sharing information to ensure we're best placed to address that risk.
Fantastic. And Sudha, do we actually have some questions that you wanted to put from the audience?
Yeah, absolutely, Bernard. I've got a few questions, and some of them you probably may have already answered. So I'll try and the panel has already answered. So I'll try and navigate that. The first question is around the action 6 of the roundtable action that we talked about. And the question was related to the review that was undertaken by ONSA, whether that information is available publicly. And I think you've already answered that, Jess, by saying it's on the NTC website attached to. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that's correct, Sudha. So everybody can access the final report of the RSNL review, which talks about their findings in relation to interface agreements and the recommendations moving forward. So that's not ONSA's website, but I encourage you all to visit the National Transport Commission's website for that information.
Thank you, Jess. We've got another question here. How will the National Network Map Route Planner interface with the National Automated Access System? It seems that the systems may be duplicating. Like I really don't know much about the two systems, but John, I'm assuming the question is for you.
Yeah, I'll take that. So I guess the key part here is we've agreed data capture standards, and we've got export API capabilities for the asset data. So that's the level crossing and also the bridge and culvert data that's being collected. There's a program of work from the Commonwealth called the Strategic Local Government Asset Assessment Program, which is actually collecting at the moment information on priority assets for local councils, and that information in South Australia and Victoria and New South Wales is coming into a self-service tool in HVR Go. But we've been working with the state agencies in the NAS program to enable that export and API capability to make that information then available to the new emerging automated access system. Also, as networks transition to the national automated access system, so these are in the original presentation, the notice-based side of the equation. HVR Go and the National Network Map can provide an entry point to NAS for industry, but over time, the route planner and the asset interface data will be more used for permitted routes and networks, and that's on, for example, permit schemes and permits that are under that sort of instrument rather than the notice maps.
Thanks, John. Appreciate the answer. Next question is really around this conversation around education and enforcement, and I think that's been an age-old discussion that's been around. And the question is really around, how do we know the education campaigns are being effective? That's one of the questions. And the second part of the question is, with resource limitation, would enforcement have a better outcome? And then third question. Now I'm going to third part of the question is more around the infrastructure design, and some of the infrastructure design are challenging and poses a risk itself. So I'll open to the panel, and anyone can pick up. Maybe Bernard, you could start.
Yeah,
first. Yeah.
I'm happy to weigh in, having had about 30 years of experience in government doing social marketing and education programs combined with enforcement programs. And we spent about $25 million in road safety education in New South Wales, and, hundreds of millions of dollars invested in enforcement activity around road safety. And look, there are really clear metrics and benchmarks, which are industry benchmarks around the effectiveness of education campaigns. And so, all of those that are designed by government actually meet those requirements for monitoring exactly and evaluating the outcomes associated with those education campaigns. And, a significant amount of scrutiny through the sort of funding process takes place to ensure that those campaigns are meeting their objectives of both better information for people to make decisions by, but also that they are motivating that behaviour change as well. And certainly, whilst enforcement, and we've seen a transformation of enforcement in the road space around both the combination of police and automated enforcement, I think the signature project out of the Roundtable with Queensland trialling an automated enforcement approach to level crossings safety is a really key one for us to keep our eye on, because as it's been fairly transformative in terms of the effectiveness of enforcement across Australia on our roads, automated enforcement, never been applied specifically to level crossings. And so that's a new innovation that we should keep an eye on the results of that coming out of Queensland. Happy for other members to comment.
Anyone else want to add on to the infrastructure design or anything else?
Suited just on enforcement, just adding to what Bernard just said, from a rail freight industry perspective, we do support that trial of enforcement, and we see the potential contribution that can make through even just the presence of cameras, the use of camera technology having a deterrent effect. That can be very, very helpful, and from an industry perspective, we do really support that as an action. Infrastructure design, that is also important. It's a really big potential area of work over a significant pipeline, but we see that the infrastructure upgrade works that are needed at particular level crossings. The key to making an effective improvement in the infrastructure design area is to go back to what I think has been a common theme of what we've talked about today, using data and evidence about the priority level crossings where we have got the problems, and working out if it is to do with the design and giving priority to upgrading infrastructure at those level crossings to address problematic design that might be contributing to incidents at those level crossings.
Thanks, Patrick. I think that's all we have time for today. I appreciate the panel. Thank you very much, Bernard, Patrick, John, and Jessica, for being part of this discussion. It's a really complex topic at time, but also an interesting topic. And thank you for providing your insights to this discussion. There are lots of more questions that are posted here. We may not be able to answer all of them, but I'm sure we'll try and get some of those questions out to you just for information that may be of help for future discussions. With closing, just want to thank the panel, but also just want to inform everyone the next webinar, RISP webinar, is on the 17th of June, and we'll continue our conversation on level crossing safety by looking at enhanced level crossing safety and radar technology. So look out for that information coming out, and we'll continue to focus on level crossing safety. Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for participating in the webinar, and thank you for your questions. And we look forward to seeing you again on another webinar.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone.